She took her twin's place to marry a millionaire in arranged wedlock. But what happened next? Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The morning sky was gray and heavy with the promise of rain. Outside the courthouse in downtown Houston, a young woman stood frozen at the bottom of the steps, her hands trembling as she clutched a small bouquet. Her name was Claire Evans, but today she was not Claire. Today, she wore her twin sister's veil and carried her twin sister's burden. The deal had been sealed in whispers and desperate arguments the night before. Her twin, Charlotte, could not face the arranged marriage their family had demanded. And so Claire, with her heart aching and her spirit burning, had agreed to take her sister's place. Every instinct told her to run. But when she thought of their mother's hospital bills piling high on the kitchen counter, when she thought of the letters from the bank threatening foreclosure on the small family house, she forced herself to climb the courthouse steps. Inside, the atmosphere was hushed, cold, and impersonal. At the front of the room stood a man in a dark, tailored suit. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair combed back with meticulous care. His name was Alexander Reed, heir to Reed Global Enterprises, a company so vast its skyscraper headquarters seemed to scrape the heavens. To Claire, he was a stranger. To her family, he was the savior who could erase every debt with a stroke of his pen. But to himself, Alexander had made it clear that this marriage was nothing more than a contract, a necessity to satisfy his board of directors and silence rumors of instability. Claire's fingers brushed against the gold band placed on a velvet cushion. Her heart thudded like a drum inside her chest. The officiant's voice rang through the chamber, solemn and deliberate. "Do you, Alexander Reed, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was smooth, low, but devoid of warmth. "And do you, Claire?" The officiant paused briefly over the name on the paper, the name of her sister. "Take this man to be your husband?" Claire swallowed hard. The walls seemed to close in. She remembered the promise she had whispered to her sister. "I will do this for you. I will protect us all." Her lips parted. The words escaped in a whisper, but they echoed like thunder inside her heart. "I do." The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. The small gavel struck wood, finalizing a union built on deception and desperation. Applause did not follow. There were no flowers, no laughter, no music, only silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Alexander slipped the ring onto her trembling hand. His touch was firm, controlled, but his eyes searched hers with a flicker of something unspoken curiosity, suspicion, or perhaps a trace of pity. As they turned to walk down the narrow aisle together, flashes from waiting photographers lit the marble walls. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about the unexpected union, but security guards held them back. Claire kept her gaze fixed forward, gripping her bouquet as though it could anchor her in this storm. In the black limousine that whisked them away, the space between them was thick with silence. Raindrops traced the tinted windows, and the city blurred into streaks of gray. Claire pressed her hands together to keep them from shaking. Alexander sat across from her, his posture flawless, his expression unreadable. "This is a business arrangement," he said finally, his tone sharp as glass. "You follow the terms, and you will never want for anything again. Break them, and you will regret it." Claire lifted her chin, summoning every ounce of strength. "I understand," she replied, though her voice wavered. The limousine turned toward the sprawling Reed estate, its iron gates looming like the entrance to another world. Claire's reflection in the window showed a bride in lace and pearls, but all she felt was a prisoner in silk. She told herself she would endure it, for her mother, for her family, for the promise of survival. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the lies, a spark of defiance flickered, and she did not yet know that this union of convenience would soon twist into a battle of wills, a revelation of secrets, and a love neither of them had expected. The limousine glided through the iron gates and rolled to a stop in front of the Reed estate. The mansion rose against the stormy sky like a monument carved from marble, its towering columns casting long shadows across the wet driveway. Claire stepped out with her bouquet still clutched tight, her shoes sinking slightly into the rain-slick stone. The house was magnificent, yet it felt cold, untouched by warmth or laughter. Inside, crystal chandeliers glittered above her head, reflecting in polished marble floors. She tried not to stare. For a girl who had grown up in a small, creaking house on the edge of Houston, this estate looked like a palace she had no right to enter. Her thoughts drifted back to that house. She remembered her mother sitting by the window, thin and pale, coughing into a handkerchief as hospital bills piled higher each month. She remembered the foreclosure notice pinned to their front door, the threats from the bank. Their father's passing had left them with nothing but debts, and Charlotte, the twin who was supposed to marry Alexander, had fled in fear of being trapped. Claire had stepped in because someone had to. She told herself it was duty, but the truth cut deeper. She was terrified. Terrified of losing the only home they had left. Terrified of seeing her mother denied treatment. Terrified of watching everything crumble while she stood by powerless. "Do not fall behind," Alexander's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. He strode ahead with long steps, his presence commanding, even in silence. Servants lined the hallway, their gazes fixed downward, their movements quick and precise. Claire hurried to keep up, clutching the hem of her gown. At the dining hall, a table stretched longer than any she had ever seen, set with silver cutlery and plates edged in gold. Alexander took his place at the head. She sat far down at his right, feeling as small as a shadow. The meal was elegant, perfectly arranged, but her stomach twisted too tightly to swallow more than a bite. "You understand your role," Alexander said suddenly, breaking the silence. His tone was matter-of-fact, stripped of kindness. "Appearances are everything. You will attend the required events with me. You will smile when spoken to. And you will remember this is not a marriage of love, it is a contract." Claire's hands trembled around her fork. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I understand." He studied her for a moment, eyes dark and unreadable, then returned to his meal without another word. That night, she was shown to a bedroom far larger than the entire living space of her family's house. A canopy bed stood at the center, the sheets crisp, untouched. She sat at the edge, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. A bride in silk, but a prisoner in her own heart. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Charlotte lit the screen. "Are you all right?" it read. Claire's throat tightened. She typed slowly. "I am fine. Take care of Mother." She hesitated, then added, "I will endure this." She set the phone down and pressed her face into her hands. For a moment, tears burned hot in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had made her choice. She would carry this weight. She would protect her family, no matter the cost. Outside the tall windows, rain tapped steadily against the glass, as if echoing the storm in her chest. In that vast, silent room, Claire whispered into the darkness, "I will survive this, somehow." And though fear pressed down like a heavy stone, beneath it glimmered something fragile, something stubborn. Hope. The hope that even in a marriage built on lies and contracts, she might find a way to hold on to her dignity, her courage, and perhaps in time, something more. The morning came with pale sunlight stretching across the vast Reed estate. Claire woke in the enormous canopy bed, the silence pressing down on her like a weight. She had not slept well. Every creak of the mansion had sounded like a whisper, reminding her of the role she had taken on. Her sister's place, her sister's name, her sister's vows. Yet it was Claire who bore the ring, and Claire who now carried the contract binding her to a man she barely knew. A knock came at the door. A maid entered, her movements practiced and respectful. "Mrs. Reed," she said softly, though the title sounded foreign to Claire's ears. "Mr. Reed requests your presence in the study." Her heart tightened. She changed quickly into a modest dress, chosen from the wardrobe that had been provided for her. Every garment inside was expensive, silk and satin, nothing she had ever dreamed of owning. She wondered if Alexander had selected them himself, or if they were simply another detail handled by his efficient staff. When she entered the study, Alexander was standing near the window, dressed in another dark suit, his posture flawless, his gaze fixed on the sprawling gardens outside. He turned as she stepped in. On the desk between them lay a leather folder. "This is the agreement," he said flatly, sliding the folder toward her. "You will read it and sign it. These are the terms that govern our marriage." Claire's fingers hovered above the folder before she dared to open it. Inside were pages of precise clauses and conditions, each one written with the cold sharpness of a business deal. Her eyes scanned line after line. Appear at 5 official events by his side. No interference in company matters. No access to private accounts. Privacy of separate living quarters. No romantic entanglements outside of the arrangement. The words felt like chains. She lifted her gaze to him. "And if I break one of these terms?" Alexander's expression did not soften. "Then the contract ends, and so do the protections that come with it. Your family will be left to face their debts without my intervention." Her chest ached, but she steadied her voice. "You are making sure I understand that this is a cage." "This is clarity," he corrected. "I do not believe in illusions." Claire signed her name with a hand that trembled only slightly. As the pen left the paper, a wave of finality washed over her. She was no longer just a substitute bride. She was bound by ink and silence to this life, at least until the contract said otherwise. Later that afternoon, one of the housekeepers guided her through the mansion, teaching her the routes and routines. The estate was vast. Sweeping staircases, libraries lined with leather, bound volumes, a ballroom gleaming with chandeliers. It all felt like another world, one she had entered under false pretenses. At dinner that evening, she found herself once again at the long table opposite Alexander. He spoke little, his attention fixed on his phone or the documents at his side. The silence grew unbearable. Finally, she gathered her courage. "You built all of this," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the polished wood. "But does it ever feel empty?" His eyes flicked up to hers. For a moment, something unreadable passed over his face. Then his tone sharpened again. "Do not mistake this arrangement for intimacy." She pressed her lips together, nodding. Still, the question lingered in the air between them. That night, back in her grand bedroom, Claire sat by the window with the contract folded neatly on the desk. Her phone buzzed again with a message from her sister. "Are you safe?" Claire answered only one word, "Yes." But as she looked out at the estate grounds stretching into darkness, she wondered if she was telling the truth. She had secured her mother's treatment, she had saved the house, she had given her sister freedom. Yet, in exchange, she had bound herself to a life where every smile was measured, every word controlled, and every step watched. Still, she whispered into the quiet room, "I will endure this. I must." And with those words, she blew out the lamp, the shadows of the mansion swallowing her whole as she braced for the days to come. The first week in the Reed estate unfolded like a series of tests. Claire moved from room to room with quiet footsteps, memorizing the endless corridors and the faces of the staff. Every polished surface seemed to reflect back at her, a reminder that she was playing a part that was never meant to be hers. Alexander remained distant. He worked long hours in the city, returning late at night, always immaculate in his dark suits, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, it was with precision, every word chosen like a line in a contract. Yet even in his silence, Claire felt the weight of his gaze, as if he was constantly measuring her. One afternoon, she was ushered into a smaller salon where a stylist and etiquette coach awaited her. "Mr. Reed has arranged this," the coach explained briskly. "There are upcoming events where you must present yourself correctly. Posture, conversation, etiquette, everything must be flawless." For hours, Claire practiced walking in heels across the gleaming parquet floor, balancing a book on her head, learning the right way to hold a champagne glass. She stumbled more than once, earning sighs of impatience from the coach, but she refused to give up. By the end of the day, her feet ached and her back throbbed, yet her resolve burned stronger. She would not let herself look like a fraud. Later, Alexander appeared in the doorway, watching her final attempt at a practiced curtsy. She straightened and met his eyes. His face revealed little, but she thought she saw the faintest flicker of approval before he turned away. The first real test came that weekend. A charity gala held at a glass-walled hotel overlooking the Houston skyline. Claire's dress shimmered beneath the chandelier lights, her hair swept into a careful style that made her almost unrecognizable, even to herself. As she stepped from the limousine, Alexander offered his arm. She hesitated for a heartbeat before taking it, the cameras flashing like lightning around them. Inside the ballroom, music drifted from a string quartet, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. They moved from one cluster of guests to another. Claire smiled as instructed, offering polite words, though her palms dampened inside her gloves. Then came the moment that struck hardest. A woman with ruby lips and sharp eyes leaned close, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You must be the new Mrs. Reed," she said. "Tell me, dear, which finishing school did you attend? Or did Alexander simply find you waiting tables somewhere?" The laughter that followed stung like glass. Claire's chest tightened, but she forced herself to hold her chin high. Her mind raced. She could stay silent and let the insult hang, or she could fight back in the only way she knew, by speaking the truth. "I did not attend a finishing school," she said evenly, her voice clear enough to carry. "And I was not ashamed to work. Honest work, no matter how humble, teaches lessons that wealth never could. Perhaps that is why Alexander values me by his side." The woman's smile faltered. Around them, the murmurs shifted. Alexander's gaze fell on Claire, and for once, it was not ice, but something warmer, more complex. When they returned to the table later, Claire's hands still trembled, but a spark of pride glowed inside her. She had survived the storm. That night, as the limousine carried them back through the rain, Alexander finally broke the silence. "You surprised me," he said. Claire turned her head toward him. "For better or worse?" A pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, the corner of his mouth curved. "For better." "Oh." The car rolled through the estate gates, but inside the quiet vehicle, something subtle had shifted. For the first time since the cold contract had bound them together, Claire felt the faintest hint of possibility, fragile as glass, but real enough to make her heart stir. And though she returned to her grand, silent bedroom, though the contract still lay folded like a chain on her desk, Claire closed her eyes with the echo of Alexander's words lingering in her chest. For better. Although days passed after the gala, and the memory of that night lingered in Claire's thoughts like a hidden ember. She remembered the sting of the cruel remark, the heat in her chest as she defended herself, and the unexpected flicker of admiration in Alexander's eyes. For the first time, she wondered if beneath his cold exterior there might be something more than calculation. Life in the Reed estate continued with its rigid rhythm. Each morning, staff members moved silently through the halls, and Alexander disappeared into his work. Yet small moments began to carve cracks in the walls between them. One evening, she found him alone in the library. The firelight cast shadows across the shelves, and he sat with a glass of brandy untouched on the table beside him. His eyes were distant, fixed on nothing. Claire hesitated at the doorway, then stepped inside. "You do not drink it?" she asked softly. Alexander glanced at the glass, then back at her. "I do not enjoy the taste. It is only there because people expect it." She smiled faintly. "I know something about doing what people expect." His gaze lingered on her longer than usual, and for the first time, his voice lost its edge. "You are not what I imagined when this arrangement began." Claire's chest tightened, though she forced her tone to stay steady. "Neither are you." The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was fragile, almost gentle, as though they were both testing ground neither had dared step on before. Later that night, alone in her room, Claire sat by the tall window, watching the lights of the city glimmer in the distance. She thought of her mother, her sister, the sacrifices that had brought her here. She thought of Alexander, of the moment in the limousine when his words had softened. The contract still bound them, the rules still caged her. Yet beneath it all, something unspoken was taking root, something that felt dangerously close to hope. And though she whispered to herself that she must not believe in illusions, she could not silence the warmth that lingered when she remembered the way he had looked at her in the library. The shift between them grew stronger in the weeks that followed. Alexander no longer treated Claire only as a contractual shadow by his side. He began to linger in conversation, asking about her family, about the small town where she grew up. His questions were simple, but the way he listened, truly listened, was something she had not expected from a man known in the press as ruthless and untouchable. One late evening, after another event filled with handshakes and flashing cameras, Alexander led her to the rooftop terrace of the estate. The city stretched in glittering lights beneath a velvet sky, the sound of traffic faint in the distance. He leaned against the railing, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "I built an empire," he said quietly, his voice carrying a heaviness she had never heard from him before. "I thought success would fill the silence. Instead, it only grew louder." Claire stood beside him, the cool breeze tugging at her hair. "Silence is not always empty," she murmured. "Sometimes it is waiting for the right voice to break it." His eyes turned toward her, searching, almost vulnerable. "And you think you are that voice?" She hesitated, then held his gaze. "I do not know, but I know what it feels like to be alone. I would not wish it on anyone." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city lights shimmered, the air thick with unspoken truths. Alexander's hand shifted on the railing, close enough that Claire could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. She did not move away. When they finally returned inside, the distance that had defined their marriage seemed altered. The contract still lay signed and sealed, but its power felt weaker than before. Claire carried the memory of the rooftop with her, the memory of Alexander's guarded voice and the rare crack in his armor. She lay awake in her vast bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart restless. She had promised herself she would endure this arrangement only for survival. Yet slowly, dangerously, she began to wonder if she wanted more than endurance, if she wanted truth, if she wanted him. The warmth of the rooftop evening lingered with Claire, but it did not last. Soon the first crack in her fragile world appeared. It began with whispers at another social gathering, when a sleek man with a sharp smile approached Alexander with a glass of champagne in hand. "Your wife is quite the mystery," he said, his tone dripping with amusement. "Strange that no one seems to remember her from before." Alexander dismissed him with a cold look, but the words sank like stones in Claire's chest. She forced herself to smile through the night, yet unease gnawed at her. A few days later, the unease became a storm. Claire was walking through the marble foyer when the front doors burst open, and Charlotte stood there. Her twin sister, the one who had run away from the arranged marriage, had returned. Her face was pale, her eyes frantic, but her voice was sharp. "You stole my life, Claire," Charlotte hissed. "You took my place, my vows, my name. Did you think the truth would never come out?" The staff froze, their eyes darting between the sisters. Claire's blood turned cold. She pulled Charlotte into a smaller room, desperate to silence her before Alexander arrived. "You left, Charlotte," Claire whispered harshly. "You could not handle the pressure, so I did it for you. I saved Mother. I saved our home. Do not stand here and pretend you would have had the courage." But Charlotte's anger only deepened. "You have no idea what you have stepped into. These people, this family, this contract, it is not a game. And when Alexander finds out, do you think he will forgive you?" The words cut deeper than knives. And as fate would have it, Alexander appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. His gaze moved from Claire to Charlotte, then back again, realization dawning in his eyes. The silence in that moment was suffocating. Finally he spoke, his voice cold as stone. "What exactly is going on here?" Claire's heart pounded. She opened her mouth, but Charlotte was faster. "She lied to you, Alexander. She is not me. She is the sister who pretended to be me. Everything you think you know about her is a lie." The air cracked with tension. Alexander's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening as he looked at Claire. "Is this true?" Her throat closed. Every word she wanted to say seemed trapped, but she forced herself to nod. "Yes, it is true. But I did it to protect my family. I did it to protect our mother." Alexander's face remained like marble. "You deceived me," he said quietly. "You deceived everyone." Claire stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Please, listen to me. I never wanted to trick you. I never wanted this for myself. I only wanted to keep us alive." But he turned away, his silence sharper than any words. That night, Claire sat in her room, her contract spread out before her like a cruel joke. The weight of betrayal pressed against her chest, not because Alexander had discovered the truth, but because his eyes no longer held the flicker of warmth she had come to rely on. The mansion felt colder than ever, and for the first time since she had stepped into this arrangement, Claire wondered if hope itself had betrayed her. The days after Charlotte's return were heavy with silence. Alexander withdrew into himself, his words clipped and his gaze distant. Claire felt the chill of every moment, as though the walls of the Reed estate were closing around her. The truth had been forced into the open, and now she was left to face the consequences. One evening, she found herself summoned to the study. The leather folder that held their marriage contract lay open on the desk, its pages stark under the lamplight. Alexander stood behind the desk, his hands braced against the wood, his jaw tight. "You lied to me," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "You stepped into this marriage under false pretenses. Every time you looked me in the eye, you carried a secret." Claire's throat tightened. "I never wanted to lie. I only wanted to protect my family. Our mother is sick, and the debts were crushing us." Charlotte ran. "I stayed. That is the truth." He slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing through the room. "You should have trusted me with the truth from the beginning. Instead, you made a fool of me before my board, before the public, before myself." Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. "And yet, everything I have done since that day has been real. I did not fake the way I defended you at the gala. I did not fake the way I listened to you on the rooftop. I may have entered this house under a lie, but what I feel now is not a lie." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, but he turned away sharply. Feelings mean nothing in the face of betrayal. The words shattered her. She felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to remain standing. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the simple wedding ring that had bound her to him since the day at the courthouse. She placed it on the desk. "If this is the end," she said softly, her voice breaking but steady, "then I will not cling to something you no longer want. But before you send me away, know this. I may have begun as a fraud, but I will not leave as one. I will face the truth, no matter how much it costs me." She turned and walked out of the study, her footsteps echoing in the long hall. Her heart ached with every step, but beneath the pain was a strange sense of clarity. She had nothing left to lose. The next morning, Claire made a choice. She gathered every document, every letter, every scrap of evidence that told the real story of how she had come to stand in Charlotte's place. She carried them to the one place that would expose everything: the Reed Foundation Gala, where the most powerful eyes in the city would be watching. That night, beneath the glow of chandeliers and the hum of music, she stepped onto the stage with trembling hands. The folder in her arms felt like a weight and a weapon all at once. "This marriage began with a lie," she said, her voice ringing out through the ballroom. "And tonight, I will no longer hide it." The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed, and in the front row, Alexander's eyes locked on hers, dark with shock, anger, and something else she could not yet name. Claire took a breath. For the first time since she had stepped into this mansion, she was no longer playing a role. She was simply herself. The ballroom had fallen into stunned silence after Claire's confession. For a moment, it seemed as though the chandeliers themselves had stopped glittering, as though every breath in the room had been stolen. She stood at the podium, her hands shaking, the folder of evidence spread open before her. "I am not Charlotte Evans," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I am her twin sister, Claire. I stood at that courthouse because my family was drowning in debt and illness. I wore her veil, I signed her vows, and I carried her name. It was wrong, and it was a lie. But everything I have done since that day has been my truth." Murmurs rippled across the crowd. Flashes from cameras lit the hall like lightning. Claire lifted her chin, her eyes locking on Alexander. "If this means losing everything, so be it. I would rather walk away in honesty than remain in a gilded cage of deceit." She stepped down from the stage, the weight of the room pressing on her shoulders. But before she could leave, Alexander rose from his seat. The sound of his chair scraping across the marble floor echoed like a drumbeat. He strode to the center of the ballroom, his presence commanding every gaze. "Enough," he said, his voice ringing through the hall. "You all came here tonight for spectacle, for whispers and judgment, but you will leave with the truth. Claire may have entered my life through a lie, but she has shown more integrity, more courage, and more loyalty than anyone I have ever known." The crowd gasped again. Claire froze, her breath caught in her throat. Alexander turned toward her, his dark eyes unyielding but filled with something new, something raw. "You defended me when others mocked me. You listened when no one else would. You brought light into a life that had been nothing but silence. And tonight, You risked everything to stand in truth. That is not betrayal. That is bravery. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Gasps rippled through the ballroom as he dropped to one knee in front of her. Opening the box revealed a diamond ring that sparkled brighter than the chandeliers above them. "I no longer want a contract," he said. "I no longer want a lie. I want you, Claire, the real you. Will you marry me? Not by paper, not by arrangement, but by love?" Claire's eyes blurred with tears. Her hands flew to her mouth as the weight of his words struck her. She had walked into this night ready to lose everything. Instead, she had been given back her dignity, her truth, and something she never dared to hope for: love. Her voice broke, but her answer was clear. "Yes. Yes. I will." Applause erupted through the hall, thunderous and unrestrained. For the first time since the day she stepped into her sister's place, Claire felt free. Weeks later, a quiet ceremony was held in the gardens of the Reed estate. No contracts, no secrets, no lies, only vows spoken with sincerity. Claire walked down the aisle in a simple gown, her mother smiling from a chair near the front, Charlotte weeping softly beside her. Alexander took Claire's hand, and this time, when they said, "I do," it was not for survival or for appearances. It was for forever. As they kissed beneath the arch of roses, Claire felt the chains of the past fall away. She had entered this mansion as an impostor, but she now stood as a wife, a partner, and a woman who had found love not in wealth or power, but in truth. And for the first time, her heart whispered not of endurance, but of joy.